The piercing wail of the alarm cut through the darkness, jolting Michael Turner awake at 4:30 a.m. His hand slapped the clock with practiced precision before his eyes even opened. 20 years of early mornings had programmed his body to function before his mind caught up. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, feeling the familiar creak of the worn mattress beneath him. The Seattle winter chill had seeped through the thin walls of the apartment overnight, and he could see his breath fog in the dim light. Just another day, Michael whispered to himself, a mantra that had carried him through 3 years of solitary parenthood. The sound came soft at first, barely audible, but it stopped Michael cold before he could stand. A small cough from the bedroom across the narrow hallway, followed by another sharper and more insistent. Then came the whimper that turned his stomach to ice. "Daddy!" Emily's voice was raspy, fragile. Michael crossed the hallway in 3 strides, flicking on the small lamp beside his daughter's bed. Emily's cheeks blazed red against her pale face, her auburn curls stuck to her forehead with sweat. At 3.5, she looked impossibly small beneath her faded princess blanket, the one thing he'd managed to save from their old life. "Hey, sweetheart." Michael knelt beside her bed, pressing his lips to her forehead. The heat radiating from her skin confirmed what he already knew. "You're burning up." Emily coughed again, the sound rattling deep in her chest. "My throat hurts, Daddy." Michael's mind raced. Today was the quarterly inventory at the port. His supervisor had emphasized that everyone needed to be on time, no exceptions. Missing it wasn't an option, not when the company was looking for reasons to cut staff. But as Emily's small hand clutched his warm and desperate, the decision made itself. "Don't worry, Em. Daddy's going to take care of you." Michael reached for his phone on the nightstand, scrolling to find his supervisor's number. 3 rings later, a gruff voice answered. "Turner, you better not be calling to tell me you're running late." Michael cleared his throat. "Frank, I'm sorry, but Emily's sick. High fever, bad cough. I need to get her to the doctor." The silence on the other end stretched long enough that Michael thought the call had dropped. "This is the worst possible day, Turner. You know that." Frank's voice had an edge that made Michael's stomach tighten. "I know. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious." Another pause. "Fine, but I'm marking this as unpaid, and I expect you to make up the hours this weekend." The call ended without goodbye. Michael exhaled slowly, tucking the phone away. One crisis averted another beginning. He'd have to dip into the rent money to cover the lost wages, which meant another conversation with his landlord about paying late. Again. "Come on, princess. Let's get you some medicine and see the doctor." Emily nodded weakly, lifting her arms to be picked up. Michael gathered her against his chest, feeling her burning body against his. She tucked her head beneath his chin, a perfect fit, like she'd been designed to nestle there. The emergency pediatric clinic opened at 7:00 a.m. Michael sat in the waiting room with Emily dozing against his shoulder, her breathing labored. The receptionist had eyed his worn jeans and faded Seattle Mariners sweatshirt. When they arrived, her gaze lingering on the scuffed work boots caked with port grime. He was used to that look, the one that sized up his worth in a glance, and found it wanting. "Emily Turner," a nurse called from the doorway, clipboard in hand. Michael followed her through the antiseptic-scented hallway to an examination room. Dr. Patel entered minutes later, her smile warm, but her eyes concerned as she examined Emily. The diagnosis came swiftly, severe bronchitis verging on pneumonia. She wrote out prescriptions for antibiotics and an inhaler. "She'll need these immediately," Dr. Patel said, handing over the slips of paper. "And she should stay home for at least a week, no daycare." Michael's heart sank. "A week." Dr. Patel nodded, her expression softening slightly at the panic that must have shown on his face. "I understand it's difficult, Mr. Turner, but if you send her back too soon, she could end up hospitalized. Her lungs are very inflamed." "I understand. Thank you, doctor." At the pharmacy counter, Michael's fear transformed into cold reality as the pharmacist rang up the medications. "That'll be $87.42, she said. "Your insurance covers part of the antibiotic, but the inhaler isn't fully covered." Michael pulled out his wallet, knowing before he opened it that he didn't have enough cash. He slid his debit card across the counter instead, holding his breath as the pharmacist ran it through the machine. He pictured his bank balance, $147. After this and the missed day's pay, he'd be left with barely $50 to stretch until next Friday. The machine beeped, printing a receipt. Transaction approved. One bullet dodged, but the month had just begun and rent was due in 3 days. As Michael waited for the prescription to be filled, Emily dozed against his chest. Her small body felt unnaturally warm through his sweatshirt, each labored breath a reminder of what mattered most. His fingertips brushed against something in his pocket, the edge of a photograph. He knew without looking what it was, Rachel smiling up at the camera, her auburn hair the same shade as Emily's, blowing across her face on their last camping trip together. 7 months pregnant with Emily, glowing with life and possibility. 4 months later, she would be gone, leaving Michael with a newborn daughter and a shattered heart. Mr. Turner, the pharmacist's voice broke through his memories. Your prescription is ready. Also, I wanted to mention, she lowered her voice, leaning slightly over the counter. There's a charity event tonight at the Westlake Hotel. Bright Path Software is hosting a fundraiser for their children's medical assistance program. If you register, your daughter might qualify for free medications next time. They specifically help with these inhalers. She slipped him a glossy flyer along with the medicine bag. My sister works for them. It's a good program. Michael studied the flyer, elegant black text on cream paper, advertising an evening of cocktails and compassion to benefit underprivileged children with medical needs. The kind of event where tickets probably cost more than his weekly salary, where people in $1,000 suits would sip champagne and feel good about themselves for helping the less fortunate. Thanks, Michael said anyway, tucking the flyer into his pocket next to Rachel's photo. I appreciate it. Back at the apartment, Michael settled Emily on the couch with her favorite stuffed rabbit, a worn one-eared thing she'd named Hoppy, and administered the first doses of medication. She fell asleep almost immediately, her breathing still ragged, but less labored than before. Michael sat on the edge of the coffee table, watching her chest rise and fall, caught between relief and dread. When the knock came at the door, he moved quickly to answer it before it could wake Emily. Jason Reynolds stood in the hallway, his broad shoulders filling the doorframe. At 6'3", with hands calloused from 15 years working the cranes at the port, Jason looked more like a heavyweight boxer than a dock worker. But the paper bag in his massive hands and the concern in his eyes revealed the gentleness beneath the rough exterior. Heard about Emily from Frank, Jason said, stepping inside when Michael moved aside. Figured you might need supplies. He placed the bag on the counter, unpacking containers of chicken soup, fresh fruit, a bottle of children's Tylenol, and a 6-pack of Michael's favorite beer. How bad is it? Michael ran a hand through his hair, suddenly aware he hadn't showered since yesterday. Bronchitis. Doc says she needs to stay home for a week. Jason let out a low whistle. Frank's gonna love that. Yeah, well, Frank can go to hell. The words came out sharper than Michael intended, edged with the desperation he was trying to contain. Sorry, it's just rent's due Friday, and I was counting on overtime this week. Jason nodded, understanding without needing more explanation. Listen, my sister Amber works at that tech company, Bright Path. They're doing some charity thing tonight for kids' medical costs. She could get you in, maybe get Emily registered for their program. Michael pulled the crumpled flyer from his pocket. The pharmacist mentioned it. But I don't exactly fit the black tie crowd, and I can't leave Emily. Bring her. Amber says they love having actual kids there, makes the rich folks open their wallets wider. Jason grinned. Besides, they serve fancy food. You could both use a decent meal that doesn't come from a microwave. The suggestion hung between them. Michael glanced at Emily, still sleeping on the couch. The inhaler that had cost almost half his remaining money sat on the coffee table beside her. What time? Michael finally asked. Starts at 7. I'll text Amber. She can meet you at the side entrance, bypass the whole ticket thing. Jason clapped a hand on Michael's shoulder. And hey, who knows, maybe you'll meet some rich divorcee looking for a rugged dock worker to spice up her boring life. Michael snorted. Right, because that's exactly what I need. But after Jason left, the idea took root, despite Michael's resistance. The program could help with Emily's medical costs, which would ease some of the financial pressure crushing him. And one night of pretending to belong in a world of wealth and privilege seemed a small price to pay for that relief. As the afternoon waned, Emily's fever subsided enough for her to sit up and sip some of Jason's chicken soup. Michael broached the subject carefully. Hey, Em, how would you feel about going to a special party tonight? There might be other kids there and fancy desserts. Emily's eyes, so like Rachel's, it sometimes hurt to look at them, widened slightly. Can I wear my blue dress, the one with the flowers? The dress had been a splurge for Emily's third birthday, purchased from a thrift store, but still the nicest thing she owned. Michael had been saving it for a special occasion. Absolutely. It's a very fancy party. Emily's smile, though weakened by illness, lit something in Michael's chest that had been dark for too long. Will there be princess? Michael thought about the wealthy women who would likely attend the fundraiser draped in designer gowns and diamonds. I bet there will be. While Emily napped again, Michael dug through his closet for something approximating formal wear. At the back, protected by a plastic dry cleaning bag, hung the one suit he owned, navy blue, purchased for Rachel's funeral and unworn since. His fingers traced the lapel, the memory of that day threatening to overtake him, the rain, the small gathering of friends, the impossible weight of the infant carrier in his hand containing a daughter who would never know her mother. Not now, Michael whispered to himself, forcing the memories back into their compartment. He removed the suit from its bag, relieved to find it unwrinkled and still fitting, though slightly loose. He'd lost weight in the years since Rachel died, the combination of grief and constant work, carving away at his once solid frame. At 6:30 p.m., Michael and Emily were ready. He'd given her another dose of medication, packed the inhaler in his pocket, and brushed her auburn curls until they shone. The blue dress brought out the color in her eyes, making them appear more green than brown in the apartment's dim light. Michael wore his navy suit with the one decent tie he owned, a subtle gray silk that had been a gift from Rachel on their last anniversary. Before leaving, Michael paused at the small table beside the door, where Rachel's photograph sat in a simple frame. Emily reached up and touched her mother's face, a ritual they performed whenever they left the apartment. "We'll be back soon, Mommy." She said the words practiced, but sincere. Michael touched the frame as well, his throat tight. "Watch over us," he added silently, a prayer to a woman who had once been his entire world and was now reduced to paper and memory. The Westlake Hotel stood like a gleaming sentinel against the Seattle skyline, its glass and steel exterior reflecting the city lights. Michael parked his battered pickup truck 3 blocks away, both to avoid the valet service he couldn't afford, and to hide the vehicle that would immediately mark him as an outsider. He carried Emily, who had insisted on bringing Hoppy along, despite Michael's gentle suggestion that stuffed rabbits might not be appropriate accessories for fancy parties. Jason's sister Amber met them at the service entrance, as promised, her Bright Path employee badge hanging around her neck. With her dark hair pulled into a severe ponytail and horn-rimmed glasses perched on her nose, she looked every bit the tech company professional. "You must be Michael," she said, extending her hand, "and this must be Emily. Jason's told me all about you both." Emily, suddenly shy, buried her face in Michael's shoulder. "Thank you for this," Michael said, shaking Amber's hand. "I really appreciate the help." Amber's smile was genuine, lacking the condescension Michael had braced himself for. "Don't mention it. The program's actually incredible. My nephew benefited from it last year when he needed surgery. I'm happy to help another family get access." She led them through service corridors, explaining the event as they walked. "It's a fundraiser for Bright Path's Children's Health Initiative. Our CEO started it 3 years ago. Basically, we partner with local hospitals and pharmacies to cover costs that insurance doesn't, focusing on chronic conditions and emergency care for kids whose families fall into the coverage gap." They emerged into a glittering ballroom already half filled with Seattle's elite. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across table settings that probably cost more than Michael's monthly rent. Waiters in crisp black uniforms circulated with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Michael felt immediately out of place, hyper-aware of his second-hand suit and scuffed dress shoes. Amber seemed to sense his discomfort. "Listen, the registration desk for the program is over there." She pointed to a quiet corner where 2 women sat behind laptops. "They can get Emily's information and explain the benefits. I need to check in with my team, but I'll find you later, okay?" As Amber disappeared into the crowd, Michael took a deep breath and headed toward the registration desk, Emily still in his arms. She had perked up slightly, her eyes wide as she took in the sparkling scene around them. "Look, Daddy," she whispered, pointing at a woman in a floor-length emerald gown. "A real princess." Michael smiled despite his nervousness. "Maybe, sweetheart. Let's go talk to these ladies first, okay?" He was halfway across the room when Emily squirmed suddenly in his arms, twisting to see something behind them. The motion caught Michael off guard, and before he could adjust his grip, she slipped slightly. In his attempt to secure her, Emily's elbow knocked against a passing waiter's tray. The champagne flutes wobbled precariously, and Michael lunged to stabilize them. But in doing so, Emily leaned too far in the opposite direction. The events unfolded in slow motion, Emily's small body tipping backward, her startled gasp, Michael's desperate grab, and then the solid impact as she collided not with the floor, but with someone standing behind them. The sound of expensive fabric tearing cut through the ambient chatter of the ballroom. Michael spun around Emily now, safely in his arms, to find himself face to face with a woman whose expression shifted from shock to recognition in the span of a heartbeat. Her champagne had spilled down the front of her navy blue dress, creating a darkening stain across the silk. But it was her eyes that captured Michael's attention, clear, intelligent, gray-blue, framed by subtle makeup that enhanced rather than concealed. "I am so sorry," Michael began, mortification washing over him. This was exactly the kind of scene he dreaded, confirmation that he didn't belong in this world of wealth and refinement. But instead of the anger or disgust he expected, the woman knelt down to Emily's eye level, seemingly unconcerned about her ruined dress or the growing audience of curious onlookers. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" Her voice was warm, gentle, with an undertone of genuine concern. Emily, who normally shied away from strangers, nodded slowly. "I'm sorry about your pretty dress," she whispered, clinging tighter to the hoppy. The woman smiled, and something in Michael's chest shifted unexpectedly. "This old thing, don't worry about it. Dresses can be cleaned, but making sure you're okay is much more important." She touched Emily's hand lightly. "What's your bunny's name?" "Hoppy," Emily replied, her voice gaining strength. "He only has one ear because I loved him too much." The woman's laugh was genuine, musical. "The very best toys are the ones we love too much." She straightened, finally meeting Michael's gaze directly. "I'm Catherine Bennett." The name registered immediately. Catherine Bennett, CEO of BrightPath Software, one of Seattle's fastest-growing tech companies. Her face occasionally appeared in the business section of newspapers Michael glimpsed at the diner where he and Emily sometimes had breakfast on Sundays. 32 years old and already helming a company valued at hundreds of millions, the kind of success story that seemed to exist in a different universe from Michael's daily struggle to make rent. "Michael Turner," he managed, extending his free hand. "And this is Emily. We're really sorry about your dress." Catherine shook his hand firmly. "Truly, it's nothing. But you both look like you could use a quiet place to sit for a moment. Would you join me? I was just heading to my table." Before Michael could formulate a response, she was already leading them toward a table near the front of the room, situated on a small platform that elevated it slightly above the others, clearly a place of honor. Emily had relaxed in his arms, her earlier shyness replaced by curious glances at Catherine. "You're very pretty, Tom," Emily stated matter-of-factly as Michael set her down in a chair. "Are you a princess?" Catherine's smile deepened, revealing a small dimple in her left cheek. "No, not a princess, just someone who works with computers." "My daddy works with big machines at the port," Emily announced proudly. "He can lift things taller than buildings." Michael felt heat rise in his face. "Crane operator," he clarified, though he didn't know why he felt compelled to correct the childish exaggeration. "Well, assistant operator. I'm working towards certification." Catherine nodded, genuine interest in her expression. "That's impressive. It takes real skill to handle equipment that size." A waiter appeared with fresh napkins and offered to bring Catherine a new dress from the hotel's boutique. She declined politely, insisting the stain wasn't visible enough to warrant changing. Another server placed a plate of fruit and small sandwiches in front of Emily, who eyed them with obvious hunger. "Go ahead, sweetheart," Catherine encouraged. "Those little ones with the pink filling are strawberry cream cheese. They're my favorite." Emily needed no further invitation, reaching for a sandwich, with Hoppy still clutched in one arm. As she ate, Catherine turned her attention back to Michael. "So what brings you to our fundraiser tonight, Mr. Turner?" The formality of Mr. Turner from someone younger than him felt strange, but Michael appreciated the respect it conveyed. "Emily's doctor mentioned your program. She has bronchitis, needs medication. Our insurance doesn't fully cover." He hesitated, then decided honesty was the simplest approach. "Jason Reynolds' sister Amber helped us get in tonight." Recognition flickered across Catherine's face. "Amber's one of our best developers. And yes, that's exactly what the program is for, filling those coverage gaps that leave families making impossible choices between medication and necessities." There was something in her tone, a personal understanding that seemed deeper than corporate philanthropy, that made Michael look at her more closely. Catherine Bennett didn't fit his preconception of a tech CEO. Despite the elegant dress and perfectly styled blonde hair, there was an approachability to her, an absence of the condescension he'd expected. "It's a great initiative," Michael said, meaning it. "Makes a real difference for families like—" He caught himself before saying "like us," the admission of his financial situation sticking in his throat. "For families who need it." Catherine seemed to catch the unspoken qualifier, her gaze softening slightly. "That's why I started it. Healthcare shouldn't be a luxury, especially for children." She glanced at Emily, who was happily demolishing her second sandwich. "How old is your daughter?" 3.5, Michael answered, unable to keep the pride from his voice. "Going on 30 sometimes." Catherine laughed. "She's beautiful. Has her mother's eyes, I imagine?" The question was innocent, conversational, but it landed like a physical blow. Michael's pause must have communicated what words didn't, because Catherine's expression immediately shifted to regret. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have presumed." Michael shook his head. "No, it's all right. Yes, she has Rachel's eyes. Rachel passed away when Emily was 6 months old. Car accident." The sympathy in Catherine's face was genuine, lacking the uncomfortable pity Michael had grown accustomed to seeing. "I'm truly sorry for your loss, Michael. Raising a child alone isn't easy under any circumstances." There was something in her voice, a depth of understanding that suggested personal knowledge rather than theoretical empathy. Before Michael could respond, a man in an expensive suit approached their table, bending to whisper something in Catherine's ear. She nodded, then turned back to Michael with an apologetic smile. "I need to give my welcome speech soon, but please stay and enjoy the evening. Make sure to register Emily for the program before you leave. I'll have someone show you where to go after dinner." As she stood, Catherine's hand briefly touched Emily's curls in a gesture so natural it seemed unconscious. "It was lovely meeting you, Emily. Take good care of Hoppy. And your dad, okay?" Emily nodded solemnly. "Will you come back? You didn't try the pink sandwiches yet." Something flickered across Catherine's face, surprise, then a genuine warmth. "I'll try to come back if I can. Save me one amalakikim." With that, she moved toward the stage area, stopping occasionally to greet guests with the practiced ease of someone comfortable in her role as host. Michael watched her go, struck by the strange twinge of disappointment at her departure. Ridiculous, he told himself. Women like Catherine Bennett didn't exist in his world, and the brief intersection of their lives tonight was nothing more than circumstance. The lights dimmed slightly, and Catherine took the stage. The room quieted immediately, attention focused on her despite the champagne stain visible on her dress if one looked closely enough. She didn't try to hide it, which struck Michael as both confident and refreshingly honest. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight to support Bright Path's Children's Health Initiative." Her voice carried clearly through the ballroom, strong without being forceful. "3 years ago, when we started this program, I made a promise that no child in Seattle would go without necessary medication or treatment simply because of a coverage gap or financial limitation." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the room before continuing. "This isn't just corporate philanthropy for me. It's personal." Another pause, briefer this time. "When I was 20, my parents died in a car accident. My brother was only 12. I became his guardian overnight, dropped out of college despite my scholarship, and took 3 jobs to keep us afloat." The revelation rippled through Michael like an electric current. He sat straighter, suddenly seeing Catherine in an entirely new light. "One winter, my brother developed severe asthma. The inhaler he needed cost $250, money we didn't have. I had to choose between that inhaler and our rent." Her voice remained steady, but emotion underlined each word. No parent, no guardian, no one responsible for a child should ever have to make that choice. Michael felt the weight of the inhaler in his pocket, remembering how his stomach had dropped when the pharmacist had told him the price. Had Catherine actually lived that reality? It seemed impossible that the polished, successful woman on stage had once stood where he now stood, counting pennies, weighing impossible choices. Last year, our program provided critical medications and treatments to over 5,000 children in the Seattle area. Tonight, I'm announcing an expansion beginning next month will extend coverage to include emergency room visits and necessary surgical procedures. Applause erupted, genuine enthusiasm replacing the polite attention of moments before. Catherine acknowledged it with a graceful nod before continuing. Success means nothing if we don't use it to lift others. My brother is now studying architecture at Stanford thanks to the scholarships he earned through his own hard work. But he might never have had that chance if we hadn't received help when we needed it most. Her gaze seemed to find Michael in the crowd, though he knew it must be his imagination. Tonight, as you enjoy this wonderful meal, please remember that your generosity isn't abstract. It's the inhaler a child needs to breathe. It's the antibiotics that prevent a simple infection from becoming life-threatening. It's the difference between despair and hope for families who want nothing more than to see their children healthy and thriving. As Catherine concluded her speech and stepped down from the stage, the room erupted in applause again. Michael found himself clapping too moved despite his usual cynicism about wealthy people's charity events. There had been no condescension in Catherine's words, no self-congratulation, just a clear-eyed understanding of what families like his faced every day. Emily tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy, is the pretty lady coming back now?" Before Michael could answer, servers began delivering the main course to each table. Their table, he noticed, remained half empty, clearly reserved for important guests who had yet to arrive. He wondered if they would be asked to move now that Catherine had fulfilled her brief obligation of hospitality. "I'm not sure, sweetheart. She's very busy tonight." Emily's face fell slightly, and she hugged Hoppy closer. "But I saved her a pink sandwich." Michael's heart constricted at his daughter's simple kindness, a quality she'd somehow maintained despite the losses and limitations of her young life. "That's very thoughtful of you. Maybe she'll come back later." As if summoned by their conversation, Catherine appeared at the table again, now accompanied by an older man whose tailored suit and confident bearing marked him as someone accustomed to influence. "Michael, Emily, this is Dr. James Harrington, Brightpath's Chief Medical Officer. He oversees our health initiatives." Catherine resumed her seat beside Emily, who immediately brightened. "James, this is Emily Turner and her father, Michael." Dr. Harrington extended his hand to Michael with a warm smile. "A pleasure to meet you both." Catherine mentioned Emily's been having some respiratory issues. Bronchitis, was it? The professional interest seemed genuine, lacking the patronizing tone Michael had braced himself for. He nodded. "Yes, with risk of developing into pneumonia. She's on antibiotics and an inhaler now." As Dr. Harrington engaged Michael in conversation about Emily's treatment, Catherine leaned toward Emily, who proudly presented the saved sandwich. The simple gesture, a child offering a slightly squashed finger sandwich to a woman who could afford the finest cuisine in Seattle, might have been awkward or patronizing. Instead, Catherine accepted it with the gravity the offering deserved. "You remembered. Thank you, Emily." She took a bite, her expression one of exaggerated delight that made Emily giggle. "Definitely still my favorite." Throughout dinner, Michael found himself increasingly drawn into conversation with Catherine and Dr. Harrington. They discussed the challenges of Seattle's healthcare system, the rising costs of housing, and the difficult balance working parents faced. Not once did Michael feel talked down to or pitied. Instead, his perspectives were met with genuine interest and respect. When Emily began to tire her illness, reasserting itself despite the excitement of the evening, Michael knew it was time to leave. He'd yet to register for the program, the original purpose of their attendance, but Emily's health came first. "I should get her home," he said during a lull in the conversation. "She needs rest and another dose of her medication soon." Catherine nodded immediately. "Of course, but before you go," she signaled to a staff member who approached with a tablet. "Let's get Emily registered for the program right now." The efficiency with which Catherine handled the registration process impressed Michael. Within minutes, Emily was enrolled, her prescription information logged, and a follow-up appointment scheduled with a program coordinator. When finished, Catherine handed Michael a card with her direct contact information. "If you have any issues or questions, please don't hesitate to reach out." Her tone was professional but warm. The program should cover Emily's inhaler and any additional medications she needs while recovering. Michael stared at the card, overwhelmed by the unexpected kindness. "Thank you. This means—" He paused, gathering himself. "It makes a big difference." Catherine's smile reached her eyes, crinkling the corners slightly. "That's exactly why we created it." As Michael gathered Emily, who was now half asleep, against his shoulder, Catherine walked them to the service entrance where they would arrived. Away from the glittering ballroom and the quieter hallway, she seemed somehow more approachable, less the CEO and more the woman who had once struggled to pay for her brother's inhaler. Will Emily be all right getting home? She seems very tired. Concern colored Catherine's voice as she lightly touched Emily's forehead, checking for fever with the instinctive movement of someone used to caring for a sick child. She'll be fine. My truck is just a few blocks away. Michael shifted Emily's weight, her breathing now deep and even against his neck. Catherine nodded, then reached into her small clutch purse. Here's a parking validation. The hotel will cover it if you're in their garage. Michael felt heat rise in his face. We're not I parked on the street. Understanding flashed in Catherine's eyes, not pity, but recognition. She tucked the validation away without comment. Smart. The hotel charges a robbery. The simple acknowledgement, her refusal to make him feel less for his financial reality, caught Michael off guard. In that moment, he saw past the CEO title, the designer dressed the perfect hair. He saw a woman who remembered what it meant to count every dollar, who knew the weight of responsibility that came with being someone's everything. It was nice meeting you, Catherine. The words felt inadequate, but anything more seemed presumptuous. Likewise, Michael, take care of that beautiful girl. She smiled once more, then added almost as an afterthought, there's a library program for kids on Saturday morning story time at the Central Branch downtown. I volunteer there sometimes. Emily might enjoy it once she's feeling better. Was it an invitation? Michael couldn't tell and didn't trust himself to interpret her tone correctly. She loves stories, he said simply. Catherine nodded, a faint smile playing at her lips. Most children do. It's the adults who forget how to listen. With that enigmatic comment, she stepped back, allowing them to pass. Good night, Michael Turner. As Michael carried Emily to his truck through Seattle's misty evening, he found himself replaying the encounter, trying to make sense of Catherine Bennett. She defied his expectations at every turn. A wealthy CEO who spoke without condescension, who understood struggle from experience rather than observation, who treated his daughter with genuine warmth rather than performative kindness for an audience. Emily stirred against his shoulder as he unlocked the truck. Daddy, I like the princess lady. Michael smiled, settling Emily into her booster seat. She's not a princess, remember? She works with computers. Emily yawned, clutching Hoppy close. She feels like a princess. Her eyes drifted closed again, the excitement of the evening and her illness finally overwhelming her. As Michael drove home through Seattle's glittering downtown, the card Catherine had given him seemed to burn in his pocket, a tangible connection to a world that had always felt inaccessible. Not just the world of wealth and influence, but the world where unexpected kindness appeared when most needed, where people saw past circumstances to the humanity beneath. At home, after tucking Emily into bed and giving her the evening dose of medicine, Michael sat at their small kitchen table, Catherine's business card between his fingers. The heavy stock paper felt expensive, the embossed Bright Path logo catching the light. Her personal cell number was handwritten on the back, the neat script at odds with the corporate formality of the front. Michael placed the card on the table, his gaze drifting to Rachel's photograph on the shelf. Her smile, frozen in time, held the same warmth and openness he'd seen in Catherine tonight, a quality that had drawn him to Rachel from their first meeting in a university physics class he'd barely passed while she'd aced it effortlessly. What would you think of her? Michael whispered to the photograph. Rachel had always been the better judge of character, seeing past surfaces to the truth beneath. She would have either liked Catherine immediately or seen through any pretense to the reality. But there had been no pretense, that was the thing. Catherine Bennett had been genuine in her concern for Emily, in her understanding of Michael's situation, in her passion for the program she'd created. Or perhaps he was reading too much into a brief encounter, assigning depth to what had simply been professional courtesy. Michael's phone buzzed with a text from Jason. How'd it go? Amber said you met the boss lady herself. Michael hesitated, unsure how to characterize the evening. Emily's registered for the program, he finally typed. Your sister was a huge help. Thanks. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. Amber says Bennett never sits with program applicants. Usually just does her speech and mingles with the big donors. Must have made an impression. Michael closed the text without responding, unsettled by the implication. Had their meeting been as unusual as Jason suggested? And if so, what did that mean? Nothing, he told himself firmly. Catherine Bennett had simply been kind to a sick child and her father. Reading anything more into it was foolish. And yet, as he prepared for bed, the memory of her parting words lingered. There's a library program for kids on Saturday mornings. Not quite an invitation, but not quite casual information either. Something in between a door left slightly ajar, waiting to see if he would walk through. Michael set his alarm for 4:30 a.m., knowing that even with Emily sick, he couldn't afford another day off work. As he drifted towards sleep, his mind replayed moments from the evening, Catherine kneeling to Emily's level, despite her expensive dress, accepting a squash sandwich with genuine gratitude, speaking about her own struggles without self-pity or romanticization. In his dreams, Michael stood on the deck of a ship, watching Seattle's skyline grow distant. Rachel stood beside him, her hand in his, Emily between them. But when he turned to look at his wife, it was Catherine's face. He saw her gray-blue eyes reflecting the water below. He woke with a start at 3:47 a.m., disoriented and strangely unsettled. Checking on Emily, he found her sleeping peacefully, her fever having broken during the night. The inhaler sat on her nightstand beside Hoppy, a tangible reminder of the evening's unexpected outcome. Michael returned to his room, sleep now elusive. Today, really, he would return to the port, to the rhythm of loading and unloading cargo, to the careful dance of crane and container. He would return to his real life, where CEOs and charity galas existed in newspaper articles and television reports, not in his direct experience. And yet something had shifted. A door had opened, even if just a crack, to a possibility he hadn't considered, that the boundaries between his world and Catherine's might be more permeable than he'd believed. That a woman who had fought her way from hardship to success might understand his struggles in ways others couldn't. That perhaps when Emily was better, they might find their way to the library on a Saturday morning to see if what had begun as chance could develop into something more. It was a foolish thought born of exhaustion and the surreal quality of the evening. But as Michael finally drifted back to sleep, he couldn't quite dismiss it entirely. In the space between waking and dreaming, anything seemed possible, even the unlikely connection between a dock worker and a CEO, brought together by a spilled drink and a one-eared rabbit named Hoppy. The port hummed with activity as cranes swung overhead, moving containers from ship to shore with mechanical precision. Michael stood at his station, eyes tracking the movement of steel against sky. 5 days had passed since the charity gala, and Emily's health had improved enough for her to return to daycare that morning. The antibiotics and inhaler, fully covered by BrightPath's program, had worked their magic, transforming his feverish, wheezing daughter back into the energetic chatterbox who filled their small apartment with endless questions and imaginary adventures. Turner, wake up. The voice of Frank Donovan, port supervisor for 15 years, and thorn in Michael's side for 3, cut through his thoughts. That container's been hanging for 30 seconds. We don't pay you to daydream. Michael refocused, guiding the operator through the final placement with practiced hand signals. The massive container settled onto the waiting truck with barely a sound, a perfect landing that Frank would never acknowledge. Sorry, Michael muttered, though Frank had already moved on to berate someone else. The man had been especially difficult since the quarterly inventory, as if determined to prove Michael's absence had disrupted the entire operation. Don't let him get to you. Jason appeared at Michael's side, clipboard in hand. He's on everyone's case this week. Rumor is management's looking at cutting 5 positions before summer. Michael's stomach tightened. 5 based on what? Efficiency metrics, whatever that means. Frank's probably trying to show he can squeeze more work out of fewer people. Jason lowered his voice. Listen, some of us are meeting after shift at O'Malley's to discuss options. You should come. The thought of missing dinner with Emily after being gone all day didn't sit well. I can't. Emily's just getting better and... Bring her. Denise is bringing their kids too. We're talking about our livelihoods here, Mike. If cuts are coming, we need to be prepared. The radio crackled with another container number, ending their conversation. Michael returned to his position, but Jason's words echoed in his mind. 5 positions cut would mean 5 families without income, 5 mortgages or rents unpaid, 5 health insurance plans terminated. In Seattle's brutal housing market, job loss could mean homelessness within months. When the shift ended at 4:30, Michael found himself following Jason to O'Malley's, a worn but clean pub 6 blocks from the port. The owner, a former dock worker who'd invested his workers' comp settlement after a crane accident, kept the back room reserved for port employees. By the time Michael arrived with Emily, a dozen workers had gathered around pushed-together tables, voices low but urgent. Emily settled at a corner booth with chicken fingers and the coloring book Michael always kept in his bag, while the adults huddled nearby. Union rep Dave Mercer, gray-haired and battle-scarred from 30 years of labor negotiations, laid out what he knew. Management's claiming decreased shipping volume, but the numbers don't support it. This is about boosting profit margins before the quarterly report. Dave's weathered hands spread across a printout of figures. They're targeting the mid-level positions, assistant operators, logistics coordinators. Positions like Michael's, the realization settled cold in his stomach. What's the union doing about it? Someone asked. Fighting it, but the contract language gives them wiggle room for operational adjustments. Best protection is making yourself indispensable. Dave's gaze found Michael. Turner, you still working on your certification? Michael nodded. He'd completed most of the classroom requirements for full crane operator certification before Rachel's death. Only the final practical hours and exam remained perpetually postponed by the demands of single parenthood and survival. Finish it. Certified operators are harder to replace. Dave looked around the group. Everyone needs to document their contributions. When they make cuts, they'll look at performance metrics first. The conversation continued, strategies proposed and debated. But Michael's attention drifted to Emily. She sat humming to herself, crayon moving carefully within the lines of her coloring book, Hoppy propped beside her plate. The thought of losing his job, of being unable to provide for her, sent a wave of nausea through him. A notification chimed on his phone, an email from Bright Path's Children's Health Initiative confirming Emily's enrollment and detailing covered medications. At the bottom was a personal note. Michael, hope Emily's feeling better. Don't forget story time at Central Library, Saturday 10 a.m., KB. Catherine Bennett had remembered. More surprisingly, she'd taken the time to add a personal note to an automated email. Michael stared at the message, unsure what to make of it. Was it professional courtesy? Genuine concern? Something else entirely? Jason's voice pulled him back to the present. Earth to Mike. We're talking contingency plans here. Michael pocketed his phone. Sorry, what did I miss? We're setting up a phone tree, making sure everyone stays informed. Jason studied his friend's face. You okay? You've been distracted all day. Just worried about Emily. The half-truth came easily. And now this job situation. Jason didn't look convinced, but let it slide. Well, we're all watching each other's backs. That's the point of tonight. By the time they left O'Malley's, Emily had fallen asleep in the booth, head pillowed on Hoppy. Michael carried her to the truck, mind divided between job security worries and the unexpected invitation from Catherine. As he drove home through Seattle's evening traffic, Emily stirred in her booster seat. Daddy, can we see the princess lady again? The question startled Michael. Emily hadn't mentioned Catherine since the night of the gala. She's very busy, sweetie. She runs a big company. Emily's lower lip jutted out stubbornly. But she said there's stories at the library. I like stories. So she'd been awake enough to hear that part of the conversation at the gala. Michael weighed his options. The library program was public, not a personal invitation. There would be other families, other children. It wouldn't be crossing any boundaries to attend. Maybe if you're feeling better by Saturday. Emily's smile lit up the truck cab. I'm better now. All better. The deliberate cheerfulness in her voice, her attempt to ensure she wouldn't miss an opportunity, squeezed Michael's heart. Children shouldn't have to calculate this way, shouldn't have to prove wellness to experience joy. Yet here was his daughter already learning to navigate a world of limitations and compromises. We'll see, Princess. Let's get through the week first. Back at their apartment, Michael went through the evening routine on autopilot: dinner, bath, story, bed. As Emily drifted to sleep, he sat at the kitchen table with his laptop, reviewing the requirements to complete his crane operator certification. The final practical exam would cost $750 plus time off work for the testing day. Money and time, the two resources he never had enough of. Yet the email from Catherine had ignited something he hadn't felt in years: possibility. Not romantic possibility, that door had closed with Rachel's death, but the possibility that his world could expand beyond the rigid boundaries of workday care home that had defined the past 3 years. Friday morning brought a fresh challenge. Emily woke coughing again, not as severely as before, but enough to concern Michael. Just a little cough, Daddy, Emily insisted, already reaching for the clothes she wanted to wear to daycare. Not sick. Michael felt her forehead, no fever, but the cough worried him. I think you should stay home today, just to be safe. Emily's face crumpled. But tomorrow is the library. If I don't go to daycare today, you won't take me tomorrow. The calculation again, the awareness of conditional access to joy. Michael knelt beside her bed. That's not true. If you're feeling better, we'll go to the library no matter what. But I don't want you getting sicker by pushing too hard today. Promise? I promise. Michael pressed a kiss to her forehead. Now let me call work. Frank's reaction was predictably hostile. Again, Turner. This is getting to be a pattern. She was just released from the doctor yesterday. Her cough's back this morning. Michael fought to keep his voice even. I'll make up the hours this weekend. Can't you find someone to watch her? We've got the safety inspection today. Michael closed his eyes, cursing silently. He'd forgotten about the quarterly safety inspection, a crucial evaluation that impacted everything from insurance rates to contract renewals. I'll try to get coverage and come in for that part. He hung up and immediately called Jason, who agreed to pick up Michael for the 2-hour inspection window, while his wife Denise watched Emily. Crisis temporarily averted, Michael spent the morning tending to his daughter, whose cough gradually improved with rest and medication. By the time Jason arrived to drive them to the port, Emily was peacefully napping. Michael left her with Denise, a kind-eyed woman who had practically co-parented Emily during the worst days after Rachel's death. Go! Denise shooed him toward Jason's waiting truck. We'll be fine. I've got soup simmering and Disney movies queued up. The safety inspection went smoothly until Inspector Hammond reached Michael's station. A thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a perpetually disappointed expression, Hammond had been conducting port inspections for 20 years and prided himself on finding violations others missed. Turner, Hammond acknowledged, flipping through his checklist. I need to see your emergency shutdown sequence. Michael demonstrated the procedure flawlessly, then moved to the communication protocols. As he reached for the radio, Frank appeared behind Hammond, his expression smug. Turner was absent during our preparation meeting, Frank announced. Maybe you should ask someone else to demonstrate. Hammond frowned. Is that true, Turner? I was home with my sick daughter this morning, but I'm fully up to date on all safety protocols. Michael kept his voice professional despite the burning in his chest. I can demonstrate anything you need to see. Hammond hesitated, then nodded. Show me the new container balance check procedure implemented last month. Michael froze. New procedure. There had been no notification, no update to the manual. He glanced at Jason, who looked equally confused. There is no new procedure for container balancing, Michael said carefully. The last update was 6 months ago, adding the secondary weight verification step. Hammond looked to Frank, who shrugged with artificial innocence. We covered it in this morning's meeting. Everyone else is up to speed. The implication was clear. Michael was unprepared a liability. Frank had deliberately set him up to fail the inspection, creating an excuse for him to be among the 5 cuts. Before Michael could respond, Jason stepped forward. With respect, Mr. Hammond, there was no new procedure discussed this morning. I was present for the entire meeting. Frank's face darkened. Are you calling me a liar, Reynolds? I'm stating facts. Jason stood his ground. If there's a new procedure, none of us heard about it. Hammond looked between them, clearly uncomfortable with the conflict. I'll need to consult my documentation. Let's move on to the emergency response drill. The rest of the inspection proceeded without incident, but the damage was done. Frank had planted a seed of doubt about Michael's competence, one that could bloom into justification for termination when the cuts came. After Hammond left, Frank cornered Michael near the locker room. You're making this personal, Turner. It doesn't have to be. You lied to a safety inspector. Michael kept his voice low, aware of others nearby. You compromised port safety to target me. Frank stepped closer, using his height advantage to loom over Michael. 5 positions are being cut. 5 people lose their livelihoods. Would you rather it be a father of 4, or maybe Johnson, who's putting his kid through college? Everyone here has responsibilities, Turner. You're not special because you're doing it alone. The words struck like physical blows, each one finding a vulnerable spot. Michael had never claimed special treatment, had worked holidays, and doubles had come in sick himself more times than he could count. But Frank wasn't wrong about others having responsibilities too. Every position cut would create ripples of hardship. I've never asked for special treatment, Michael finally said. But I won't let you sabotage me either. Then stop giving me reasons. Frank turned away. If you can't handle the job requirements, maybe this isn't the place for you. The drive back to Jason's house passed intense silence, broken only when they pulled into the driveway. Frank's targeting you specifically, Jason said. You need to document everything, every shift change request, every interaction. If they try to fire you, we'll need evidence of discrimination. Michael nodded, exhaustion settling into his bones. Thanks for backing me up in there. That's what we do. Jason clapped a hand on his shoulder. No one stands alone. Inside, Michael found Emily curled on the couch with Denise color returned to her cheeks, the cough reduced to an occasional tickle. She brightened when she saw him. Daddy, Mrs. Denise made magic soup, and I feel all better. The simple joy in her voice washed away some of the day's tension. Magic soup, huh? Did you thank Mrs. Denise? Emily nodded solemnly. 3 times, and I helped wash the spoons. She's been a perfect helper, Denise confirmed, standing to gather Emily's things. The cough is much better. I think she'll be fine for your library trip tomorrow. Emily's eyes widened. You remembered. Of course I remembered. I promised, didn't I? Michael helped Emily into her jacket. Thank you, Denise. Seriously. Denise waved away his gratitude. Anytime. That's what family does. Family. The word followed Michael home, echoing in his mind as he prepared dinner. His biological family was gone, parents dead before Emily was born. No siblings, Rachel, an only child whose parents had retired to Florida and rarely called. Jason, Denise, a handful of other Port families, they had become his support system, his chosen family. And now Catherine Bennett had entered their orbit, however briefly. Someone from outside their world who nevertheless seemed to understand it in ways others with her privilege didn't. Michael found himself wondering about her brother, the boy she'd raised while still barely an adult herself. Where was he now? Did they remain close, or had success and status created distance between them? Saturday morning dawned clear and cool, a rare break in Seattle's spring rain. Emily woke excited, pulling on her favorite blue dress without prompting and carefully arranging Hoppy on her bed to guard our home. The princess lady might be there, she informed Hoppy seriously. I have to look extra nice. Michael didn't correct her terminology this time. Let her have this small fantasy, this brief belief in princesses who read stories at libraries. Reality would intrude soon enough. The Central Library stood like a modern glass cathedral in downtown Seattle, its distinctive geometric design catching the morning light. Emily gasped when they entered, her eyes tracking up to the soaring ceilings and zigzagging escalators. It's so big, she whispered, gripping Michael's hand tighter. Bigger than the whole world. The children's section occupied a colorful corner of the 3rd floor. As they approached, Michael spotted Catherine immediately seated on a low chair surrounded by a half-circle of children. She wore jeans and a simple blue sweater, her blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, a stark contrast to the elegant CEO who had commanded attention at the gala. Yet somehow this version seemed equally authentic, perhaps even more so. Emily froze at the edge of the carpet, suddenly shy now that her princess was real and present. Catherine looked up mid-sentence in her reading, and her eyes met Michael's. A smile of recognition brightened her face, but she continued reading without interruption, giving Emily time to adjust to the environment. Michael led his daughter to an open spot in the back of the group where they sat cross-legged on the carpet. Catherine's voice carried clearly as she read about a rabbit who wanted to reach the moon. Her expression animated, her tones shifting for each character. Emily leaned forward, completely absorbed in the story, her earlier shyness forgotten. When the tale concluded, Catherine led the children in a simple craft project, creating paper rockets to send to the moon. Volunteers distributed supplies while Catherine moved among the tables, helping small hands with scissors and glue. She reached their table, last kneeling beside Emily with natural ease. I'm so glad you could come today. Are you feeling better? Emily nodded, suddenly finding her voice. Mrs. Denise made magic soup, and I have medicine that doesn't taste yucky anymore. Magic soup sounds wonderful, and I'm very happy to hear about the medicine. Catherine glanced at Michael, her smile warm. How's the program working out? Any issues with the coverage? It's been seamless. Michael helped Emily attach a paper fin to her rocket. The pharmacy said everything was fully covered. I can't thank you enough. That's exactly how it should work. Catherine assisted a boy at the next table who was struggling with his rocket, then returned. Emily, would you like to show your rocket to Miss Patty? She's collecting them for our display. Emily hesitated, looking to Michael for reassurance. At his nod, she carefully carried her creation to the librarian across the room. Catherine took the opportunity to sit in the small chair beside Michael. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she admitted, her voice low enough that only he could hear. "I know Saturday mornings are precious when you work all week." The acknowledgement of his time constraints, understanding rather than pity, caught Michael off guard. Emily was excited about it. "She's been calling you the princess lady all week." Catherine laughed, the sound genuine and unrestrained. "That's a new one. I've been called a lot of things in the tech world, but princess has never made the list." Kids have their own categories. Michael watched as Emily proudly presented her rocket to the librarian. "Thank you for including her today. It means a lot after being sick." "She's a wonderful girl." Catherine's gaze followed his to where Emily was now showing another child how to attach the fins. "You're doing an amazing job with her, especially under the circumstances." The compliment, delivered without condescension, warmed something in Michael's chest. Before he could respond, Catherine continued, "Listen, we're having a small gathering at the park across the street after this, just juice boxes and cookies for the kids. Nothing fancy. You're both welcome to join us." The invitation seemed genuine, casual, in a way that put Michael at ease. "That sounds nice. I think Emily would like that." Catherine smiled, then rose as Emily returned. "Your rocket is magnificent. Would you like to join us for cookies in the park afterward?" Emily's enthusiastic nod settled the matter. 30 minutes later, they crossed the street to a small urban park where several families from the reading group had gathered. Catherine distributed juice boxes and cookies from a large tote bag, moving among the children with comfortable familiarity. Michael found himself talking with other parents, a rare social interaction that didn't revolve around work or daycare logistics. One father, Mark, had brought twin boys and spoke openly about the challenges of parenting after his wife's deployment overseas. "It's the little things that get you," Mark said, watching his sons chase each other around a bench. School forms asking for mother's signature, birthday party invitations addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Chen. "Society doesn't quite know what to do with us single dads." Michael nodded, feeling a kinship with this stranger who understood the peculiar isolation of male single parenthood. "Emily's daycare called me Mr. Mom for the first year, like I was playing a role instead of just being a parent." Their conversation continued, touching on school law options, pediatricians who took their concerns seriously, the challenge of dating as single fathers. Michael hadn't discussed these topics with anyone outside the Port families before, hadn't realized how much he'd needed this specific kind of connection. Across the park, Emily had attached herself to Catherine's side, following her as she distributed the last of the snacks. Catherine didn't seem to mind answering Emily's stream of questions with patient attention. Watching them together, Michael felt an unexpected pang. Not jealousy, but awareness of what Emily had lost in growing up without a mother. When Catherine eventually made her way back to where Michael sat, Emily trailed behind her, happily clutching a second cookie. "Your daughter has been helping me survey cookie preferences," Catherine explained, settling on the bench beside him. "Apparently, chocolate chip is the universal favorite, with snickerdoodle coming in second." "Important research," Michael agreed solemnly. "Very important." Catherine's smile reached her eyes, crinkling the corners. "She also told me all about Hoppy and his adventures. I understand he's guarding your home today." The fact that Catherine remembered the stuffed rabbit's name, that she engaged with Emily's imaginative world without condescension, impressed Michael more than any business accomplishment could have. "Hoppy takes his security duties very seriously." Emily nodded vigorously. "He only has one ear, but he can still hear bad guys coming. The very best guards can sense trouble, even with one ear." Catherine agreed. She checked her watch and sighed. "I hate to cut this short, but I have a conference call at noon." "On Saturday." The question escaped before Michael could filter it. Catherine shrugged, a hint of resignation in the gesture. "Welcome to the tech world. We're competing globally, which means someone's always working somewhere." She turned to Emily, her expression softening. "I had a wonderful time today. Thank you for helping with the cookies." Emily stepped forward impulsively and wrapped her arms around Catherine's waist. "Thank you for the stories and cookies. Can we come back next week?" Catherine returned the hug naturally, one hand gently smoothing Emily's curls. "Storytime happens every Saturday. You're always welcome." She met Michael's gaze over Emily's head, a question in her eyes. "We'll try to make it." Michael said, not wanting to promise what he might not be able to deliver if work intervened. As they prepared to leave, Catherine handed Michael a business card different from the one she'd given him at the gala. This one had her personal number written on the front, not hidden on the back. "In case Emily has any more questions about cookies or rabbits," she said lightly, but her eyes conveyed a deeper invitation. Michael took the card, acutely aware of the weight it carried beyond its paper substance. "Thank you for today, for all of it. It was my pleasure. Truly." Catherine smiled once more, then turned to greet another parent, seamlessly transitioning Beto back into her role as volunteer coordinator. Walking back to the truck, Emily's hand warm in his, Michael felt oddly disoriented. The morning had been simple, a library story, timed cookies in a park, yet it represented a significant departure from the rigid routine that had defined their lives since Rachel's death. More than that, it had introduced a new person into their small circle, someone who seemed to bridge the worlds Michael had always viewed as separate and incompatible. "I like her," Emily declared as Michael buckled her into her booster seat. "She smells like cookies and books." Michael smiled at his daughter's straightforward assessment. "She's very nice, isn't she? Can she come to our house sometime? I want to show her my drawings in Hoppy's special place." The request gave Michael pause. Their apartment, with its peeling paint and secondhand furniture, was a far cry from what he imagined Catherine's home must be like. The thought of her seeing the cramped space where they lived, the visible evidence of their financial constraints, sent a ripple of discomfort through him. "Maybe someday," he hedged. "Miss Catherine is very busy with her job." Emily accepted this with a child's fluid attention span, moving on to describe the park squirrels she'd observed. But the question lingered in Michael's mind as they drove home. What exactly was happening here? Was Catherine simply being kind to a child who needed support? Was there a professional interest in seeing how the program benefited recipients? Or was there something more personal developing? The possibility both attracted and alarmed him. Catherine Bennett inhabited a world of board meetings and charity galas, of influence and wealth he could scarcely imagine. He loaded shipping containers and struggled to make rent. The gap between them yawned wide and deep. Yet there had been moments today, the genuine laugh, the easy way she sat on the ground with the children, the understanding in her eyes when she mentioned his limited free time that suggested Catherine hadn't forgotten where she came from, hadn't been fully transformed by success and status. Sunday brought a welcome respite from both work concerns and social complications. Michael and Emily spent the morning at their favorite diner, where the waitresses knew their order by heart and slipped Emily extra bacon when they thought Michael wasn't looking. They visited the small playground near their apartment, then spent the afternoon making a fort out of couch cushions and blankets, a rainy day tradition that dated back to Emily's toddlerhood. As they sat inside their fabric cave flashlights creating shadow puppets on the walls, Emily suddenly asked, "Do you think Mommy would like Miss Catherine?" The question struck Michael silent. Emily rarely asked about Rachel directly, though he made a point of sharing stories and keeping her mother's memory alive. She'd been too young when Rachel died to have her own memories, which somehow made these questions more poignant. "I think she would," Michael finally answered, choosing honesty over evasion. "Your mom liked people who were kind and smart. Miss Catherine seems to be both those things." Emily nodded, satisfied with this assessment. "I think Mommy sent her to us. From heaven." The childish certainty, the simple faith that good things came from her mother's continued love, brought a lump to Michael's throat. "Maybe she did, Princess. Your mom always wanted us to be happy." Monday morning arrived with the harsh buzz of the alarm and a return to routine. Michael dropped Emily at daycare, her cough now just an occasional tickle, and headed to the port. The day passed in the familiar rhythm of containers and ships, the physical demands of the job, leaving little mental space for reflection. It was mid-afternoon when Jason sought him out during a brief break. "You hear about the management meeting?" Michael shook his head, gulping water from his thermos. "Happened this morning. Dave got word they've finalized the cut list." Jason lowered his voice. 5 names. They're announcing Friday." The timeline was sooner than Michael had expected. "Any hint who's on it?" "Nothing concrete, but Frank's been smirking all day, which can't be good." Jason hesitated. "Listen, Dave said there's an opening at the Tacoma port. Lower seniority required similar pay scale. If things go south here, Tacoma's a 90-minute commute each way." Michael recapped his thermos with more force than necessary. I can't leave Emily in daycare for 12 hours a day. Jason nodded understanding without needing it spelled out. Just wanted you to know all the options. We're still fighting this, by the way. Dave's filing a grievance about the inspection incident. The support meant everything, but Michael harbored few illusions about corporate decisions being reversed by union grievances. If his name was on that list, no amount of solidarity would save his job. The weight of uncertainty followed him through the week, casting a shadow over each shift. Emily sensed his tension despite his efforts to shield her, becoming clingy at drop-offs and asking repeatedly if he was sad about something. By Thursday, Michael had developed a contingency plan. If he lost his job, he'd immediately apply for unemployment, take whatever part-time work he could find, and use the crane operator certification money for rent instead. They might need to move to a cheaper apartment, maybe outside the city. The thought of uprooting Emily from her daycare and familiar surroundings twisted in his gut, but survival had to come first. That evening, as Michael stirred spaghetti sauce on the stove, his phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. "Michael, it's Catherine. Hope you don't mind me texting. Wanted to let you know we've added vision coverage to the CHI program. Emily should be fully covered for an exam and glasses if ever needed. Also, will you both be at Storytime Saturday? We're reading about elephants, which I hear is a favorite animal of a certain young lady." The message took him by surprise, not just its content, but its casual personal tone. Catherine had clearly remembered Emily chattering about elephants during their park conversation. The thoughtfulness of it, reaching out midweek, sharing program information that specifically benefited Emily, recalling a detail from their brief interaction, left Michael momentarily speechless. Before he could overthink it, he typed back, "We appreciate the vision coverage. Emily will be thrilled about the elephants. We'll try to make it work, schedule permitting." Catherine's response came quickly. "Understood. Work comes first. If you can't make Saturday, maybe we could arrange another time. The aquarium has a new elephant seal exhibit Emily might enjoy." The invitation was clearer now, impossible to misinterpret as merely professional courtesy. Catherine Bennett was deliberately extending their connection beyond the chance encounters and program-related interactions. She was suggesting a planned meeting specifically arranged for them. Michael stared at the phone sauce forgotten on the stove. The timing couldn't have been worse. With his job hanging in the balance with financial catastrophe potentially days away, the last thing he should consider was complicating his life with whatever this was developing into. And yet, Emily's delight in Catherine's company had been obvious. The opportunity to give his daughter experiences he couldn't otherwise afford, like visits to the aquarium, was tempting. And if he was honest with himself, Catherine's interest in them, her willingness to bridge the vast gap between their worlds, stirred something he'd thought permanently dormant after Rachel's death. As the spaghetti sauce began to bubble over, bringing Michael back to the immediate moment, he made a decision. Let's see how Saturday goes first. Emily would love the aquarium sometime, though. He pressed send before he could reconsider, then turned his attention back to dinner preparations. Catherine's reply came as he was draining the pasta. "Perfect. No pressure. Looking forward to elephants and story time, hopefully with my two favorite library patrons." The warmth that spread through Michael's chest at those words, my two favorite library patrons, caught him off guard. It had been so long since anyone outside family and close friends had expressed such simple, uncomplicated affection for them both. So long since he'd felt the particular pleasure of being noticed, remembered, prioritized by someone new. As he set the table for dinner, calling Emily from her room where she'd been playing, Michael allowed himself to acknowledge the truth he'd been avoiding all week. He was developing feelings for Catherine Bennett, feelings that went beyond gratitude for her help or appreciation of her kindness toward Emily, feelings that were as ill-advised as they were undeniable. Emily bounded into the kitchen, Hoppy dragging from one hand. "Spaghetti, my favorite." She climbed into her chair, then fixed Michael with a serious look. "Daddy, when is Miss Catherine coming to our house? I told Hoppy she's coming soon." Michael set a small bowl of pasta in front of her buying time. "I didn't know you'd invited her, Princess." "I did, at the park. I told her she should see our fort next time." Emily twirled spaghetti around her fork with careful concentration. "She said that sounded like fun." The innocent exchange, related now without guile or agenda, complicated things further. Emily was already forming an attachment, already creating expectations. If this tentative connection with Catherine developed further only to dissolve when she inevitably recognized the impracticality of Ed, Emily would be heartbroken. "We'll have to clean up before any visitors come," Michael said, finally sidestepping the larger issue. Hoppy's toys are all over the living room. Friday dawned gray and threatening, Seattle's spring asserting itself after the brief sunshine. Michael dropped Emily at daycare with a tighter hug than usual, acutely aware that by day's end, he might have to tell her they needed to make some changes. The atmosphere at the port was tense, conversations hushed, every glance from management scrutinized for hidden meaning. Dave gathered the team before the shift began, his expression grim. "They're posting the list at end of day. I've done everything I can to protect our people, but 5 positions are definitely being cut." He surveyed the group, decades of labor battles evident in the deep lines of his face. "Whatever happens, we stand together. If your name's on that list, you're not alone. The union will fight for fair severance and priority rehiring when positions open again." The words were meant to reassure, but Michael heard the underlying acknowledgement of defeat. The cuts were happening. All that remained was to discover who would bear the cost. The shift crawled by each hour, stretching endlessly as Michael went through the motions of his job. By mid-afternoon, rumors circulated that the list had been finalized and sat on the administrative assistant's desk, waiting for official posting at 5 o'clock. At 4:50, Frank gathered the team for what he called a procedural update. His gaze lingered on Michael as he distributed papers that outlined revised safety protocols, genuine ones this time. "Management has determined that operational efficiency requires streamlining our workforce," Frank announced, his tone falsely regretful. "The affected positions will be notified by direct supervisors immediately following this meeting." A ripple of tension passed through the group. Direct notifications rather than a posted list meant the decisions would be delivered personally, privately, and immediately. As the meeting concluded, Frank approached Michael. "Turner, my office." The 2 words confirmed what Michael had feared since the safety inspection. He followed Frank to the small office at the end of the corridor, aware of sympathetic glances from colleagues as he passed. Jason gave him a subtle thumbs-up solidarity in what they all recognized as the march to professional execution. Frank closed the door behind them, then took his seat behind the desk. A folder lay open before him, Michael's employment record visible from where he stood. "I'll make this brief," Frank began. "Your position as assistant crane operator has been eliminated effective 2 weeks from today." Though expected, the words still landed like physical blows. Michael forced himself to remain expressionless, to deny Frank the satisfaction of seeing him break. The decision was based on objective performance metrics. Frank pushed a paper across the desk. "You've accumulated more unscheduled absences than any other operator in your classification. Your productivity numbers are in the bottom quartile. The company can't afford to carry underperforming staff." Each accusation burned with the particular pain of half-truths. Yes, Michael had taken days off when Emily was sick, days he'd made up with weekend shifts that didn't appear in the official attendance record. Yes, his productivity sometimes lagged when he worked on insufficient sleep after Emily's nightmares or illness. But he'd never shirked responsibility, never done less than his best under the circumstances life had dealt him. "I understand," Michael said, because there was nothing else to say. Arguing would accomplish nothing. Frank had won. "You'll receive 2 weeks severance in addition to your notice period, and your health insurance will continue through the end of the month." Frank closed the folder, the matter concluded to his satisfaction. "I'll need your security badge at the end of your notice period." Michael nodded, unable to trust his voice for more. As he turned to leave, Frank added almost casually, "For what it's worth, Turner, it wasn't personal. Just business." The lie hung in the air between them, too blatant to acknowledge, too cruel to ignore. Michael left without responding, the office door closing behind him with quiet finality. Jason waited in the locker room, face tight with concern. "Well," Michael nodded, once the gesture conveying everything. 2 weeks notice, end of the month, 4 health insurance." Jason swore under his breath, then clasped Michael's shoulder. "Dave's already working on the grievance. And there's still Tacoma. I can't do Tacoma." Michael opened his locker, going through the motions of end-of-shift routine while his mind raced ahead to impossible calculations. Rent due in 2 weeks, Emily's daycare payment, groceries, the cascade of expenses that wouldn't stop just because his income had. I'll figure something out. Come to O'Malley's. The guys want to help strategize. Michael shook his head. I need to pick up Emily. I can't. I can't face everyone right now. Jason seemed about to argue, then nodded in understanding. Tomorrow, then, we'll come up with a plan. The drive to the daycare passed in a blur. Seattle's familiar streets reduced to gray background as Michael grappled with the new reality. In just 4 weeks, he would be unemployed, uninsured, and unable to meet his financial obligations. The careful balance he'd maintained since Rachel's death had been upended by a vindictive supervisor and corporate indifference. Emily ran to him when he entered the daycare, her face bright with the day's adventures. Daddy, we made elephant masks today, like the book Miss Catherine is going to read. The coincidence elephants appearing in both daycare crafts and Catherine's planned story time struck Michael as both beautiful and painful. Emily's world remained full of simple joys and magical connections. His had just collapsed into uncertainty and fear. That's wonderful, princess. Michael lifted her into a hug that lasted longer than usual, breathing in the scent of crayons and playground dirt that defined his daughter's days. Let's go home. As they drove, Emily chattered about her elephant mask and the upcoming library visit, her excitement palpable. Michael listened, responding in all the right places, while his mind continued its frantic calculations. They could perhaps last 2 months on his savings and the severance pay. After that, they'd need to leave Seattle for somewhere with lower living costs, away from Emily's friends, her daycare, everything familiar. Away from the possibility that had begun to bloom between Michael and Catherine, a connection that now seemed not just unlikely, but impossible. What could he possibly offer her now? A relationship with an unemployed single father facing financial ruin, the charity case becoming even more of a burden. By the time they reached their apartment, Michael had made his decision. He would take Emily to the library tomorrow as promised, giving her one more cherished experience. Then he would explain to Catherine that their situation had changed, that pursuing any kind of connection between them would be unfair to everyone involved. That night, after Emily was asleep, Michael sat at the kitchen table with his laptop, searching job listings and calculating budget cuts. The numbers refused to align no matter how he adjusted them. Something would have to give, either their apartment, Emily's daycare, or the basic necessities of food and utilities. His phone chimed with a text. Catherine again. Looking forward to tomorrow. Emily's elephant mask from daycare sounded adorable. Hope your work week ended on a positive note. The timing was so painfully ironic that Michael almost laughed. Ended on a positive note, his entire career had just been terminated by a man who deliberately sabotaged him. His financial security had evaporated. His daughter's stability was threatened. And here was Catherine, successful, secure Catherine, with her innocent question and genuine interest in their lives. The gulf between them had just widened from a gap to an unbridgeable chasm. Michael set the phone down without responding. Tomorrow would be soon enough to end whatever had been beginning between them. Tonight he needed to focus on survival, on finding a path forward for himself and Emily in a world that had just become exponentially more hostile to their dreams. The Central Library seemed different that Saturday morning, the soaring glass architecture less inspiring, more imposing, as Michael guided Emily through the entrance. Her elephant mask clutched proudly in one hand, she skipped beside him, oblivious to the weight pressing down on his shoulders. He'd slept poorly, plagued by calculations that never balanced, and imagined conversations with Catherine that always ended with her pitying eyes. Do you think Miss Catherine will like my mask? Emily tugged at his hand, eyes wide with anticipation. I'm sure she will. The words caught in Michael's throat. He hadn't responded to Catherine's text from the night before, unable to find words that wouldn't reveal his situation before he was ready. Better to explain in person, to end whatever might have been developing between them with the dignity of a face-to-face conversation. The children's section buzzed with activity, more crowded than the previous week. Michael spotted Catherine immediately, surrounded by eager children, her blonde ponytail swinging as she helped a small boy arrange elephant cutouts on a display board. She wore a green sweater today, casual jeans, and a smile that dimmed his resolve for a heartbeat. Emily didn't hesitate, breaking free from his grasp and running toward Catherine with their mask held high. Miss Catherine, look what I made. Catherine turned, her face lighting up at the sight of Emily. She knelt to examine the mask, exclaiming over each detail with genuine enthusiasm. Her gaze lifted to find Michael, a warm smile of greeting that faltered slightly when she registered his expression. Even across the room, she seemed to sense something had changed. Michael hung back as the story time began, watching Emily settle cross-legged in the front row, completely absorbed in Catherine's animated reading about an elephant who discovered his purpose by helping others. The irony wasn't lost on him, his own purpose providing for Emily, now threatened by forces beyond his control. What value did a dock worker bring when the dock no longer wanted him? After the story concluded and the children scattered to craft tables, Catherine made her way toward Michael, concern evident in her eyes. "Everything okay? You look like you're carrying the world on your shoulders." Her directness, free from pretense or small talk, caught him off guard. "Can we talk somewhere?" Michael glanced around the busy children's section. Catherine nodded immediately. "Let me ask Patty to watch the craft tables." She squeezed his arm briefly, a gesture of reassurance that made his chest tighten, before stepping away to speak with the librarian. Minutes later, they sat in a quiet corner of the library's coffee shop, Emily visible through the glass partition as she happily glued googly eyes onto an elephant cutout. Catherine's hands wrapped around her coffee cup, her eyes steady on his face. "What's happened, Michael?" The direct question deserved a direct answer. "I lost my job yesterday. Budget cuts. 5 positions eliminated." Catherine's expression shifted from concern to something deeper, not pity, but a kind of knowing sympathy that suggested personal familiarity with unexpected loss. "I'm so sorry. Was there any warning?" "Some, but my supervisor made sure I was on the list." The bitterness he tried to contain seeped into his voice. 2 weeks notice, then 2 weeks severance, health insurance through the end of the month. The implications hung between them, the precarious financial position, the threat to Michael and Emily's stability, the sudden uncertainty of their future. Catherine processed it all rapidly, her mind clearly working through practical considerations. "Have you thought about next steps? Other positions at the port or similar facilities?" "I've been applying since last night, but the job market for assistant crane operators isn't exactly booming." Michael stared into his untouched coffee. "The real problem is timing. Even if I find something immediately, there will be a gap in income. Rent's due in 2 weeks." Catherine nodded understanding without needing details. "And Emily's daycare. Monthly payment due next Friday." Michael's jaw tightened. "I can cover it with the last paycheck, but it'll leave almost nothing for groceries." The clinical dissection of his financial collapse felt both humiliating and necessary. Catherine listened without interjecting, her face compassionate, but not pitying, the expression of someone who had faced hard choices herself, rather than merely observed them in others. "What can I do to help?" The question came without hesitation, straightforward and genuine. Michael had anticipated many responses. Awkward sympathy, polite distance, perhaps offers to connect him with employment resources. The direct offer of personal help caught him unprepared. "Nothing. That's not why I told you." He straightened in his chair, pride reasserting itself. "I wanted to explain why whatever's been developing between us needs to stop. You've been kind to Emily and to me, but I can't pursue anything right now, not with everything falling apart." Catherine's expression shifted, surprise followed by something that might have been hurt quickly masked. "I see." She was quiet for a moment, considering her response. "Can I ask why, beyond the obvious timing challenges?" "Because I won't be your charity case." The words came out harsher than intended, born from the raw wound of yesterday's termination. "I see how you look at Emily, the connection you formed. I don't want you feeling obligated to help us because you care about her." Catherine's eyes flashed, not with anger, but with a fierce intensity that reminded Michael she hadn't become a successful CEO by avoiding difficult conversations. "Is that what you think this is, charity?" "I think it would become that. Maybe not intentionally, but inevitably." Michael forced himself to maintain eye contact despite the urge to look away. "You live in a world where writing a check solves problems. My world doesn't work that way." "You have no idea what my world is like." The quiet statement carried more weight than any angry retort could have. "You've decided who I am based on my job title and bank account without bothering to know me at all." The accusation struck home, deflating Michael's defensive posture. "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" Catherine leaned forward, voice low but intense. "Did I ever offer you money? Did I ever treat you or Emily as a project rather than people? Have I done anything to suggest I see you as someone to be saved rather than someone to be known? Each question peeled back a layer of his assumptions, exposing the fear beneath his pride. Not fear of poverty, he'd faced that before, but fear of vulnerability, of allowing someone to see his struggles and stay anyway. No, Michael admitted finally. You haven't. Then give me the respect of making my own decisions about what I want and why. Catherine's expression softened slightly. If you're not interested in exploring whatever's happening between us, that's entirely valid. But don't use your job situation as an excuse, and don't decide for me what my motivations are. The coffee shop suddenly felt too small, and air between them charged with unspoken complications. Through the glass, Michael could see Emily proudly holding up her completed elephant craft, searching the room for him. The sight anchored him regardless of this conversation's outcome. She remained his constant, his purpose. I don't know what I want right now, Michael admitted, the closest to truth he could manage. Except to make sure Emily doesn't suffer because of this. Catherine nodded, accepting the partial honesty. Then let's start there. Not as charity, but as collaboration. She reached into her purse and withdrew a business card, not her own, but one bearing the logo of a staffing agency. Bright Path works with Cascade Staffing for temporary positions. They specialize in industrial and technical placements, including port operations. I can make a call, get you an interview next week. The offer threaded the needle between assistance and respect, giving Michael an opportunity without making him a recipient of personal charity. He took the card, slowly turning it over in his fingers. Thank you. The words came easier this time, free from the bitter edge of pride. I appreciate that. And about the rest, Catherine glanced toward Emily, who was now heading their way, elephant craft held triumphantly before her. We can table that discussion for now. No pressure, no expectations. Just two adults figuring things out one day at a time. Emily burst into their quiet space elephant craft aloft. Look, I made him with sparkles because elephants should be fancy sometimes. The tension between Michael and Catherine dissolved in the face of Emily's innocent excitement. Catherine exclaimed over the glittering trunk and googly eyes, while Michael watched them together, struck by how natural their interactions seemed, neither forced nor performative, just genuine mutual delight. We're having cookies and juice in the park again, Catherine explained, as Emily bounced impatiently beside her. Would you like to join us? The question hung between them, weighted now with the complicated conversation they just shared with the uncertain future Michael faced. He should say no, should begin the process of disentangling their lives before Emily became even more attached, should focus exclusively on finding employment and maintaining stability. Please, Daddy. Emily's hopeful expression tipped the balance. One more normal morning before their world potentially changed forever. He could give her that much. Sure, we'd like that. The park gathering proved livelier than the previous week, with more families in attendance and a face painter who transformed children into jungle animals. Emily joined the line immediately, declaring her intention to become an elephant to match her craft. Michael found himself chatting with Mark, the single father he'd met the previous week, while Catherine organized games for the older children. Rough week, Mark asked, noting Michael's distracted glances toward the job listing displayed on his phone. Lost my position at the port. Budget cuts. Mark winced in sympathy. Been there. Military contractor laid me off 2 years ago, right after Angela deployed. Thought we'd lose the house. What happened? Found a position teaching mechanical engineering at the community college. Less money but better hours with the kids. Mark nodded toward his twins, now sporting tiger faces. Sometimes the worst thing leads to the right thing, you know. The perspective shift, seeing job loss as redirection rather than pure disaster, lingered as Michael watched Emily transform into a gray-faced elephant, complete with trunk and tusks. Her delight in the simple pleasure reminded him that while financial security mattered enormously, it wasn't the only measure of successful parenting. His daughter was happy, healthy, loved. Whatever came next, those fundamentals wouldn't change. Catherine approached as Emily ran off to join the other animals in a game of tag. She's having a wonderful time. She is. Michael pocketed his phone, setting aside job searches for the moment. Thank you for this, for creating a space where kids can just be kids regardless of what's happening in their lives. That was the goal. Catherine's smile held a hint of something vulnerable. I never had this after my parents died. No safe spaces, no adults who weren't wrapped up in their own crises. My brother and I just survived. I wanted to create something better for other children in difficult situations. The admission a glimpse into the experiences that had shaped her deepened Michael's understanding of Catherine's motivations. Her philanthropy wasn't abstract do-gooderism but specific response to personal history, not charity but solidarity. You mentioned dropping out of college to raise him. Michael realized how little he actually knew about her journey. How did you get from there to CEO of a tech company? Catherine laughed softly. The abbreviated version worked 3 jobs until my brother started high school. Took night classes in programming because the community college offered free childcare during evening sessions. Built an app that helps single parents coordinate childcare swaps and resource sharing. A venture capital firm saw potential, provided funding to expand it, and Brightpath grew from there. The origin story upended Michael's assumptions about privilege and opportunity. Catherine hadn't inherited wealth or connections. She'd built her success from necessity and determination, driven by the same protective instinct that motivated his own daily struggles. So your first product was something you created to solve your own problem. The best innovations usually are. Catherine's gaze followed Emily as she chased a butterfly across the grass. We understand problems we've lived through in ways that theoretical knowledge can never match. The conversation shifted then, moving beyond their immediate circumstances to deeper territories, their views on education, on community, support systems, on the balance between protection and independence in raising children. Michael found himself sharing thoughts he'd rarely articulated about the pressure of being both mother and father to Emily, about the fear of failing her by missing some essential knowledge or experience that Rachel would have provided. Catherine listened without interjecting simplistic solutions or hollow reassurances, offering instead her own experiences raising a brother through adolescence without a guidebook or support system. Their exchange felt balanced, equal, 2 people who had shouldered similar responsibilities from different positions, with insights to share rather than advice to dispense. When Emily eventually tired face paint smudged from exertion and excitement, Michael realized they'd been talking for nearly 2 hours. The comfort of their conversation, its easy flow and genuine connection, had made time evaporate. We should probably head home, Michael said, gathering Emily's craft supplies and jacket. She needs lunch and probably a nap after all this excitement. Catherine nodded, then hesitated before adding, I made a call to Cascade Staffing this morning before I saw you. They're expecting your call on Monday. Ask for Diane Wilson. The proactive step taken before she even knew if he would accept her help could have felt presumptuous. Instead, Michael recognized it as characteristic efficiency, addressing a problem directly rather than waiting for permission to be useful. Thank you. He meant it sincerely this time, without the defensive edge that had tainted his earlier gratitude. For the connection and for today. Emily needed this normal morning more than I realized. Catherine's smile held understanding without pity. Children are remarkably resilient when they feel secure in being loved. You give her that security, Michael. Whatever else changes, she knows her father is constant. The observation, simple yet profound, eased something in Michael's chest that had been tight since Frank's office. Whatever his financial limitations, he provided Emily with the one thing money couldn't buy: unwavering presence and love. Will we see Miss Catherine at the library next Saturday? Emily asked as Michael buckled her into her booster seat. Elephant face smudged but still recognizable. The question forced a decision Michael had been avoiding. Continue this connection with Catherine despite the complications and his uncertain future, or withdraw now, focusing exclusively on employment and stability. Catherine stood a few feet away, giving them privacy while clearly awaiting his response. Her expression remained neutral, allowing him space to decide without pressure. We'll try Princess. It depends on some grown-up stuff this week. Michael kept his voice light, aware of Emily's perceptiveness to tension or worry. Grown-up stuff is boring, Emily declared with childish certainty. Elephant stuff is better. Her simplistic worldview, dividing life into boring adult concerns and the vibrant wonders of childhood imagination, made both adults smile. Catherine approached the truck, maintaining a respectful distance. Thank you for coming today, both of you. Her gaze included Emily, but lingered on Michael. And good luck with the interview. Diane is straightforward but fair. Just be honest about your experience and goals. The advice was practical, colleague to colleague, rather than benefactor to recipient. Michael appreciated the shift in dynamic, the respect it conveyed. I will, and I'll let you know how it goes. The implied promise that communication would continue beyond today hung between them, neither fully committed nor rejected. Catherine's smile suggested she understood the tentative nature of his statement and accepted its limitations. I'd like that. She waved to Emily, then stepped back as Michael closed the truck door. Take care, Michael. The drive home passed with Emily chattering about elephants and face paint, her world still secure despite the seismic shifts in Michael's. He listened, responding in all the right places, while part of his mind replayed his conversation with Catherine, searching for hidden meanings or unspoken expectations. He found none, just straightforward communication and genuine connection that had deepened rather than diminished when confronted with his changed circumstances. By Monday morning, Michael had constructed a plan. He would interview with Cascade Staffing, continue applying for positions at other ports and industrial facilities, and use his 2 weeks' notice to complete the final requirements for his crane operator certification. The exam fee would strain his budget further, but full certification would significantly expand his employment options and increase his potential salary by nearly 30%. The interview with Diane Wilson went better than expected. A no-nonsense woman in her 50s with decades of staffing experience, she reviewed his qualifications with professional efficiency. Your technical skills are solid. The gap is supervisory experience. Diane made notes on her tablet as they spoke. Most of our port operations clients want floor leads and shift managers who can step into operator roles as needed. My focus has been on completing certification, Michael explained. My supervisor wasn't particularly supportive of advancement opportunities. Diane nodded without surprise. Office politics is usually the real reason qualified people get overlooked. But Catherine speaks highly of your problem-solving abilities, which carries significant weight with me. The casual mention of Catherine's recommendation presented as professional assessment rather than personal favor eased Michael's concern about appearing as a charity case. Diane treated him as a qualified candidate who happened to have a professional reference, nothing more. I have 3 possibilities that might fit your experience and schedule constraints. Diane tapped her screen, sending information to Michael's email. 2 are temporary assignments that could become permanent. The third is part-time but starts immediately. Review them and let me know which you'd like to pursue. By the time Michael collected Emily from daycare that afternoon, he had scheduled 2 follow-up interviews and registered for his certification exam. The part-time position, equipment maintenance at a smaller shipping facility in Tacoma, offered immediate income that would help bridge the gap between his final port paycheck and whatever full-time position he eventually secured. Emily greeted him with her usual enthusiasm, backpack bouncing as she ran to his arms. Daddy, I drew our family today. She proudly displayed a crayon drawing showing 3 figures beneath a rainbow. A tall man labeled Daddy, a small girl labeled Me, and a blonde woman labeled Kate. Michael froze, staring at the drawing. Emily had included Catherine in their family portrait, an innocent declaration of attachment that both warned and warmed him. Children form connections based on genuine interactions, uncomplicated by adult concerns about propriety or timing. In Emily's world, Catherine had become someone who belonged in their circle, not replacing Rachel, whose memory they honored daily, but expanding their small family unit into something new. It's beautiful, Princess, Michael managed, carefully neutral. Did you show your teachers? Emily nodded vigorously. Ms. Jen said families come in all shapes. Is Kate coming to our house soon? I want to show her my room. The direct question demanded an equally direct response. I'm not sure, sweetheart. Remember that grown-up stuff I mentioned? I needed to figure that out first. Is it about your job? Jason told Mrs. Denise you got fired. Emily's matter-of-fact repetition of overheard adult conversation caught Michael off guard. He said your boss is a real... Yes, it's about my job, Michael interrupted before she could repeat whatever colorful language Jason had employed. I'll be working somewhere new soon. There might be some changes for us. Emily considered this with childish pragmatism. Will we still have spaghetti night and library day? The reduction of potentially life-altering changes to specific beloved routines twisted something in Michael's chest. We'll always have spaghetti night. Library day might change times, but we'll still go. And will Kate still be there? The persistent return to Catherine revealed the depth of Emily's attachment. Michael chose his words carefully. Kate volunteers at the library sometimes, but she has her own busy life too, Princess. We can't expect her to always be available for us. Emily's forehead creased in the expression that always preceded a declaration of determined certainty. She likes us, Daddy. She told me so. She said we're her favorite people at the library. The simple statement, Catherine's genuine affection reported through Emily's unfiltered perspective, broke through the last of Michael's reflexive defenses. Whatever complications existed between him and Catherine, whatever challenges his job loss presented, the connection forming between them deserved honest exploration rather than preemptive termination. That evening, after Emily was asleep, Michael sent Catherine a text. Interview went well. 2 follow-ups scheduled. Part-time position available immediately to bridge the gap. Thank you for the connection. Her response came quickly. Glad to hear it. Diane knows her business. If she sees potential matches, they're real opportunities. How are you holding up? The question invited honesty beyond professional updates. Michael hesitated, then decided truth served them better than pride. Taking it day by day, Emily drew a family picture today that included you. She has questions I'm not sure how to answer. The typing indicator appeared, disappeared, reappeared. Catherine clearly weighing her response carefully. Finally, children see connections adults complicate with overthinking. I'm honored she includes me in her world, but I understand it creates challenges for you as her father. The acknowledgement of both the connection and its complications opens space for genuine dialogue. I've been so focused on what I can't offer that I've overlooked what's actually developing between us. Whatever that is, it shouldn't end because my job did. Catherine's response reflected the direct approach that seemed fundamental to her character. I agree. What happens next is up to us, not external circumstances. Could we talk in person? Dinner this week, perhaps? The invitation, simple, straightforward adult, represented a deliberate step beyond the library program and park gatherings that had provided neutral territory for their initial interactions. A dinner would be intentional, acknowledged a date rather than a coincidence. I'd like that. Thursday evening, Emily has a sleepover at her friend Zoe's house. Thursday works perfectly. I know a quiet place on Lake Union where we can talk without interruptions. The arrangement settled, Michael found himself facing an unexpected emotion anticipation, not just for potential employment solutions or financial stability, but for the simple pleasure of Catherine's company without professional pretext or Emily's presence as buffer. Just 2 adults exploring the connection that had formed between them despite vastly different circumstances. Tuesday and Wednesday passed in a blur of interviews, paperwork, in preparation for his certification exam. The part-time maintenance positions started immediately, providing 20 hours weekly that Michael could schedule around interviews and Emily's needs. The pay was lower than his port position, but the income would help bridge the financial gap while he secured full-time employment. By Thursday evening, Michael had completed his first shift at the new position, scheduled his certification exam for the following week, and arranged Emily's sleepover with Zoe's family. Standing in front of his closet, he confronted the reality of his first actual date since Rachel's death. His navy suit still associated with her funeral felt inappropriate. The rest of his wardrobe consisted primarily of work clothes and casual wear for outings with Emily. He finally settled on dark jeans, a charcoal button-down shirt Rachel had given him for his 30th birthday, and the least worn of his casual shoes. The man in the mirror looked tired but determined, the past week's events etched in new lines around his eyes, but not defeating the fundamental resilience that had carried him through the past 3 years. Catherine had suggested meeting at the restaurant rather than having him pick her up, a practical arrangement that also avoided the awkwardness of him arriving at what he imagined was a luxury apartment building in his aging pickup truck. The restaurant overlooked Lake Union, small and elegant without being ostentatious, its windows offering views of boats and water, rather than Seattle's urban skyline. She waited at a corner table, hair loose around her shoulders, rather than in her usual ponytail, wearing a simple blue dress that somehow managed to look both casual and sophisticated. Her smile when she spotted him carried genuine pleasure rather than polite acknowledgement. You found it without trouble. Catherine stood as he approached their greeting, momentarily awkward. Neither a handshake nor embrace seemed quite right for the undefined space between friendship and something more. GPS is pretty reliable these days. Michael settled into the chair opposite her, taking in the restaurant's understated elegance. This is a beautiful spot. One of my favorites, quiet enough for conversation, good food without unnecessary pretension. Catherine's description revealed an awareness of his potential discomfort with overly formal dining. The seafood is exceptional if you are interested. The evening unfolded with surprising ease, their conversation flowing naturally from updates on Michael's employment progress to Catherine's current work challenges. She described an ongoing negotiation with investors without corporate jargon or name-dropping, making complex business dynamics accessible without oversimplification. Essentially, they want faster growth, even if it means compromising program quality. I'm holding the line on maintaining standards, especially for the health initiative. Catherine's expression revealed the steel beneath her approachable exterior. Some people see social impact programs as marketing expenses rather than core mission components. And you don't. I built BrightPath specifically to address gaps in support systems. The profit enables the mission, not the other way around. Catherine's conviction reminded Michael that her success stemmed from purpose rather than ambition alone. But enough about corporate politics. How's Emily handling the changes this week? The questions centering his daughter's well-being rather than logistical details epitomized Catherine's consistent prioritization of what truly mattered. Michael described Emily's resilience, her practical questions about routine disruptions rather than abstract worries about financial security. Kids have an amazing ability to focus on what's tangible, Michael concluded. As long as her immediate world feels secure, she adapts to the rest. That security comes from you. Catherine's observation carried the weight of personal experience. After my parents died, my brother asked similar concrete questions. Would we stay in our house? Would he keep his same teacher? The big picture was too overwhelming, so he focused on daily constants. Their shared experience navigating a child's needs through adult disruption created a bridge between their different worlds. As dinner progressed to dessert, Michael found himself sharing thoughts he rarely articulated, his fear of failing Emily without a partner to balance his perspective, his worry that she would miss developmental milestones or emotional support that a mother would instinctively provide. Catherine listened without interrupting, then offered her own parallel concerns from raising her brother. I constantly feared making irreversible mistakes. Every decision felt monumental. School choices, discipline approaches, even holiday traditions. I had no blueprint, no one to check my instincts against. How did you handle it? Imperfectly. Catherine's rueful smile held self-forgiveness rather than regret. I learned that consistency matters more than perfection. Children need reliable love more than they need optimal decisions at every turn. The evidence is in my brother now, successful, well-adjusted kind. Whatever mistakes I made didn't prevent him from thriving. The perspective earned through experience rather than theoretical parenting philosophy resonated deeply. Michael had been measuring himself against an impossible standard of dual parenthood performed by a single person. The shift towards seeing consistency and presence as success markers rather than gaps and absences offered a new framework for evaluating his parenting. As the evening drew to a close, Michael found himself reluctant to end their conversation. They had moved beyond the immediate circumstances of his job loss to deeper territories, values, experiences, hopes for the future. Catherine seemed equally engaged, her usual efficiency replaced by a relaxed presence that suggested she too valued the connection forming between them. Walking to their cars in the restaurant parking lot, Michael finally addressed the question that had hovered unspoken throughout dinner. I'm not sure what happens next. My situation is still unstable, and I don't know what I'm ready for beyond friendship. Catherine stopped beside her car, turning to face him directly. I'm not asking for definitions or commitments, Michael. I enjoy your company. I admire the father you are to Emily. I'm interested in exploring whatever this connection between us might become at whatever pace makes sense for both of us. The simplicity of her statement, free from pressure or expectation, eased the tension Michael hadn't realized he was carrying. I'd like that too, but I need you to understand something. He paused, searching for words that would convey his boundary without sounding ungrateful. I won't accept financial help from you. Not for rent, not for Emily's expenses, not for anything personal. That's a line I can't cross. Catherine studied him for a moment before nodding. I understand and respect that boundary. Professional connections and references are different from personal financial assistance. I won't offer the latter, and I'll be explicit about the former when it arises. The clarity of their understanding acknowledging the potential power imbalance, while establishing parameters to address it, created foundation for whatever might develop between them. Not ignoring their different circumstances, but defining how they would navigate them with mutual respect. Thank you for tonight, Michael said finally, for dinner, for the conversation, for understanding. Thank you for being willing to explore this despite the complicated timing. Catherine's smile held warmth without presumption. I've learned that life rarely arranges itself into convenient sequences. Sometimes the most meaningful connections form during the most challenging circumstances. The observation, philosophical without being trite, captured something essential about their developing relationship. Neither of them had sought this connection. Neither had been looking for the complications it introduced into already complex lives. Yet here they were, finding unexpected resonance despite or perhaps because of the challenges they each navigated. As Michael drove home through Seattle's evening traffic, he realized something fundamental had shifted. The job loss that had seemed catastrophic a week ago now appeared as disruption rather than destruction, a forced redirection rather than an ending. The path forward remained uncertain, filled with practical challenges and financial pressures. But alongside those difficulties had emerged an unexpected possibility, a connection with someone who understood struggle from experience rather than observation, who saw his worth beyond his economic utility, who valued his daughter as an individual rather than an obligation. Friday morning brought an email from one of the companies he'd interviewed with, a shipping logistics firm, offering a position that utilized his port experience while providing advancement opportunities his previous job had blocked. The salary nearly matched his former position, with better healthcare benefits and flexible scheduling that would accommodate Emily's needs. He accepted immediately, the relief of secured employment, lifting a weight he'd carried since Frank's office. The timing felt almost deliberately orchestrated. Stability returned just as he'd begun exploring something new with Catherine. Without the immediate pressure of financial catastrophe, their developing relationship could progress based on mutual interest rather than circumstantial need. The boundary he'd established regarding financial assistance became a choice rather than a necessity, a statement of values rather than pride. As Michael prepared for his final shift at the port that afternoon, he crafted a text to Catherine. Good news: accepted a position with Meridian Shipping starting next week. Comparable salary, better benefits, advancement potential. Would like to celebrate with you, perhaps include Emily this time. She's been asking when she can show you her room and introduce you to the real Hoppy. Catherine's response arrived as he pulled into the port parking lot. That's wonderful news. Congratulations on securing something so quickly, testament to your skills and experience. I'd love to celebrate with both of you. Emily's invitation to meet the real Hoppy is quite an honor. This weekend, the simple exchange, professional accomplishment, acknowledged personal connection affirmed, child's perspective, honored, crystallized what had drawn Michael to Catherine despite their different circumstances. She balanced multiple considerations with natural ease, treating each aspect of their complex situation with appropriate weight and response. Michael's final shift passed without drama. Frank maintained professional distance, any satisfaction at Michael's departure concealed behind administrative procedures. Jason and other colleagues organized an impromptu gathering at O'Malley's after work, a sending off that felt more like celebration than commiseration given his new position. You landed on your feet, Jason raised his beer in salute, and with a company that actually values experience over ass-kissing. Cheers to that. The support of his port family, the men and women who had helped him navigate the years after Rachel's death, reinforced Michael's sense that despite challenges, he wasn't alone. Community existed in unexpected places, forming and reforming as circumstances changed. Saturday morning found Michael helping Emily clean her room in preparation for Catherine's visit that afternoon. His daughter approached the task with uncharacteristic enthusiasm, carefully arranging her stuffed animals with Hoppy in the position of honor, selecting books she wanted to show their guest. Do you think Kate will like my pictures? Emily carefully straightened the crayon drawings displayed on her wall. Ocean, scenes, family portraits, abstract explosions of color. I think she'll love them. She appreciates art created from the heart. Emily nodded, satisfied with this assessment. Daddy, is Kate your girlfriend now? The direct question demanded equal directness. Kate is my friend who I enjoy spending time with. Grown-up relationships are complicated sometimes, but you smile more when she's around. Emily's simple observation cut through adult complexities to essential truth, and she makes me feel happy in my heart, like when I remember mommy but not sad too. The comparison linking Catherine to Rachel not as replacement, but as similar source of emotional security touched Michael deeply. Children recognized emotional truth adults often obscured with conditions and categories. That's a very nice way of describing it, Michael acknowledged. Kate makes me feel happy in my heart too. Emily nodded as if this confirmed something she had already determined. Then she should visit more. Happy hearts are important. The wisdom uncluttered by adult fears and complications realigned Michael's perspective. The past week had forced confrontation with practical realities, employment, financial security, professional identity. Essential concerns, certainly. But his daughter's simple focus on emotional well-being on happy hearts, rather than stable bank accounts, reminded him what truly sustained them through difficulties. When Catherine arrived that afternoon bearing a small gift-wrapped package for Emily and a bottle of wine for the adults, the atmosphere felt different from their previous encounters. Not just friends, not quite family, but something evolving toward a new configuration that honored past relationships while creating space for future possibilities. Emily proudly led Catherine on a tour of their apartment, pointing out favorite toys and drawings with proprietorial enthusiasm. Catherine followed with genuine interest, asking questions that demonstrated actual engagement rather than polite pretense. When introduced to Hoppy in his special place on Emily's bed, she treated the one-eared rabbit with appropriate solemnity, shaking his remaining ear in formal greeting. "Your room is wonderful," Catherine told Emily as they concluded the tour. "It shows so much about who you are, creative, thoughtful, adventurous." "Daddy helped me hang the pictures." Emily bounced slightly with excitement. "And sometimes we read 3 books at bedtime instead of 2. 3 books sounds magnificent." Catherine smiled at Michael over Emily's head. "Your dad creates a beautiful home for you." The compliment specific to Michael's parenting, rather than their material circumstances, acknowledged what truly mattered in creating security for Emily. Not the apartment's modest size or secondhand furniture, but the care and attention evident in personalized spaces and bedtime rituals. The evening unfolded with comfortable domesticity, preparing dinner together, Emily chattering between them, conversation flowing easily from childhood anecdotes to future plans. Catherine fit into their small space without awkwardness, helping in the kitchen with practical efficiency, engaging Emily in elaborate imagination games, respecting the routines that structured their home life. After Emily's bedtime extended by one story with Catherine as guest reader, the adults settled in the living room with wine and quiet conversation. The intimacy of sharing his home with someone new felt both strange and natural to Michael. Catherine occupied the space without judgment or excessive curiosity, neither ignoring their modest circumstances nor commenting on them. "Emily asked if you were my girlfriend this morning." Michael admitted the wine, loosening his usual caution. "Children have their own categories for relationships." Catherine smiled over her glass. "What did you tell her?" "That you're my friend who I enjoy spending time with and that grown-up relationships are complicated." Diplomatically accurate, Catherine's expression turned thoughtful. "She also asked me if I was going to be her new mommy." The revelation stunned Michael. "She what? When?" "During our room tour, when you went to answer your phone." Catherine set her glass down carefully. "I told her that no one could ever replace her mommy, that Rachel will always be her mother, but that sometimes families grow in different ways and that I care about both of you very much." The response, honoring Rachel's irreplaceable role while acknowledging new possibilities, struck exactly the right balance Michael would have struggled to articulate himself. "Thank you for understanding the complexity there. I had practice with my brother. He worried I was trying to replace our parents." Catherine's expression reflected old pain, long processed but never forgotten. Children need reassurance that new connections don't erase or diminish existing bonds. Their conversation continued into the night, moving from parenting philosophies to professional goals, from childhood memories to future aspirations. The ease between them deepened comfort, replacing the cautious distance that had characterized their early interactions. When Catherine eventually gathered her things to leave, the moment carried significance beyond a casual evening's conclusion. "Thank you for tonight," she said at the door, "for opening your home, for sharing Emily's world, for trusting me with both. Thank you for fitting so naturally into it." Michael found himself standing closer than friendship strictly warranted, drawn by the connection that had strengthened throughout the evening. "For seeing us beyond circumstances or categories." Catherine's gaze held his, the moment suspended between them with unspoken potential. "That's the heart of connection, isn't it? Seeing beyond surface to substance." The philosophy, simple yet profound, captured what had drawn them together despite their different worlds. Not pity or charity from her side, not opportunity or advantage, seeking from his, but genuine recognition of each other's essential qualities beyond external circumstances. When Michael finally leaned forward, closing the distance between them, the kiss felt like continuation rather than initiation, acknowledging what had been developing between them since that first meeting at the charity gala. Catherine responded without hesitation, her hand resting lightly against his chest, the connection between them both tender and certain. "Is this complicating things?" Michael asked when they separated, aware of the many practical challenges still facing them despite his improved employment situation. Catherine smiled, her expression combining warmth with characteristic directness. "Life is already complicated, Michael. The real question is whether the complication brings enough joy to be worthwhile." The reframing from problem to be avoided to value proposition reflected Catherine's fundamental approach to life's challenges. Not denial or evasion, but clear-eyed assessment of cost versus benefit, of effort versus reward. "And does it?" Michael asked, needing the explicit confirmation despite the evidence of their kiss. "Bring enough joy." Catherine's answer came without hesitation, her eyes steady on his. "More than enough. The real surprise isn't that we found connection despite our different circumstances. It's that we ever imagined external factors could prevent it when what matters most exists beneath the surface." The insight, philosophical yet deeply personal, resonated with truth Michael had been discovering throughout their developing relationship. The barriers he'd perceived between their worlds existed primarily in his own perception rather than reality. Catherine had never defined herself by wealth or position, had never allowed those elements to determine her connections or values. As she finally departed with a promise to call tomorrow, Michael closed the door on a day that represented not just celebration of new employment, but evolution of new possibility. The future remained complex, filled with practical challenges and necessary negotiations of different life circumstances. But alongside those complications had emerged something unexpected and profound, partnership based not on comparable finances or social position, but on shared values, mutual respect, and genuine affection. Emily had captured it with childish simplicity. Happy hearts are important. Everything else was negotiable.